from the National Catholic Register. This is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
The California wildfires have wrought unprecedented disaster in the Los Angeles area. They've also drawn out some inspiring responses of faith, hope, and charity. The Register's Shannon Mullen and Matthew McDonald share stories of California Catholics' resilience. Then we turn to the farm boy turned exorcist turned Catholic Archbishop of Milwaukee. The Register's Jonathan Liedl reports on the installation of Archbishop Jeffrey Grobb and his unique vocational journey. We also talk about sports and faith as University of Notre Dame's Catholic football coach Marcus Freeman takes on Ohio State in Monday's college football national championship game. I'm Jeanette DeMello, host of Register Radio.
And I'm Matthew Bunson, co-host of Register Radio and also EWTN News' vice president and editorial director. And I'm delighted, as always, when possible, to be here in studio in D.C., Washington, D.C., with the National Catholic Register's editor-in-chief, Shannon Mullen. And we're joined by phone by Register staff writer Matthew McDonald. Welcome to everyone.
Happy to be here.
Well, Shannon, let's start with you. The fires that began on January 7th in the greater Los Angeles area, they're still going, and it's been, more than a week now. They've had an unbelievable toll, but as Jeanette said in the welcome here to today's show, we've heard some incredible stories of resilience.
Yes, it's hard to wrap your mind around the scope and the impact, and for a lot of the people who are living this, they're still in a state of shock and still processing this. But these fires are still going on. The total fire the area that these fires have been burning is the size of San Francisco. It's the size of Miami, right? So it's huge, and there have been tens of thousands of people who have been uprooted. There have been more than 12,000 structures, homes, and businesses that have been destroyed. Many, many others damage. So it's an epic natural disaster.
Unlike anything even California's seen, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, Matt, you've had the opportunity to talk to some of the survivors about their experiences. In fact, your story about one California family's response led our page one coverage in the January 26 print edition. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Halpins, how they responded to the scene of their family home literally sitting in ashes?
Peter and Jackie Halpin in their early 60s, and they moved into a house in Altadena, which is in northern Los Angeles County, in 1988, when Jackie was pregnant with her fourth child. They eventually had a total of 6, 3 boys, 3 girls, all of whom are adults now. Their house was destroyed, and by destroyed, I mean a little bit of the foundation was left, and that's about it. They found that out when one of their sons-in-law snuck into the area, took pictures, and sent them. And Mrs. Halpin decided that they should all go back to the site because they noticed that a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe remained. So when they arrived at the site, they found that there were 2 statues, actually, Our Lady and also St. Joseph. And they didn't have a plan, but sort of spontaneously, they said a prayer that they've said as a family for many years to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And then they wanted to sing something. They weren't sure what to sing. And Peter Halpin, the patriarch of their clan, settled it by giving an intonation, a musical intonation. And that they knew from long standing that meant they were all supposed to sing Regina Caeli, 12th century hymn to Mary, Queen of Heaven. Video that was then posted online has gone viral because it's remarkable for several reasons. One is this sort of prayer in the face of disaster, but also how good it is. They sound great. And the reason they sound so great is they've been singing together all their lives, and not just singing the way many of us might in the shower, but actually taking lessons and learning about harmony. So their voices together are just terrific.
I thought it was dubbed when I first heard it, Matt, because it was so good.
Yeah.
It sounded like it was recording in a studio. And
it
was
did.
Just, yeah.
It was really a tremendous story, Matt. I mean, I read your story, and that story at ncregister.com is titled "Family Sings to Mary at Sight of Home Burned to the Ground in California Wildfires," and it's done tremendously well. So many people have read this story, but also the video. When I watched the video, I totally got choked up because it was just such an incredible response of hope in a time of crisis for this family. And so it's great that you were able to talk to them about that and really highlight their story. And as you said, they're a musical family, so it was something that they had sung for so many years. And I love that really just instills in people a response of in time of crisis, a response of beauty and hope. I did want to turn to something that Andrew Halpin said, and he told EWTN News Nightly, that this experience of the Regina Caeli was incredibly healing, and it helped all of them as a family to bring their grief to Christ. And Shannon, this reminds me of the message that Archbishop Gomez gave to his flock. You ran in the Register this week at ncregister.com, but also in the print edition, that January 26th print edition. Archbishop Gomez, Jose Gomez's message. He's the Archbishop of Los Angeles. What did he have to say to the LA Catholics and all of the people of Los Angeles?
Yeah, first, my first thought was for him, what a tough spot, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're surrounded by incredible destruction. I mean, this is happening in his archdiocese. This is his flock, and they're hurting so badly. Boy, you can. There's a lot of ways you can say the wrong thing, and so I know he must have prayed a lot about what he wrote and what he shared and what we eventually printed. And, first of all, he reminded them that God cares about each of us individually, and he loves us individually, and that's an important message. And then just how sad the Archbishop himself is about what's happening. But, it wasn't all safe stuff, right? He says, for example, every crisis is a crossroads, and in every crisis we have a decision to make. We can respond with anger and despair, and that's a natural temptation, or we can decide to accept our sufferings as somehow sharing in the sufferings of Jesus, who suffers for us and with us, and who will never abandon us, no matter how dark the path may seem. That's really speaking as a true shepherd there.
Yes, absolutely. And it makes me think of another story that brought tears and inspiration to our EWTN newsroom. It was the story of Corpus Christi Parish. Can you tell us how that story of really, it's a story of Christ letting his people know he is near. So what's that story?
Yeah, incredibly, in this large, massive swath of destruction, as far as we know, there's only one Catholic parish and one Catholic school that has been, basically utterly destroyed. And that's the Corpus Christi parish, as you mentioned it. And there was a fire captain who went back into the rubble, the ashes, and was looking for things that might give the parishioners and the community some solace. Sure enough, he came across the intact tabernacle, and inside was the Eucharist still intact. Wow, just that alone is so, it's really set your hair on edge. I mean, it's so such a powerful moment. But then you start thinking about it a little bit more, the significance of this being Corpus Christi, the significance of the Blessed Sacrament being preserved, the significance of Los Angeles. In this year, there's another Eucharistic pilgrimage. It's going to go from Indianapolis to Los Angeles. It's going to culminate on the Feast of Corpus Christi, which is June 22nd. So A big takeaway from this whole thing is that when you lose everything, all your possessions, your home, it really comes down to the essential things of life, your friendships, the people who are helping you, your life. And one of those essential things, of course, is our Lord Jesus Christ and his gift to us in the Eucharist.
Yeah, there's obviously a need on a scale that we can use that word unprecedented. We search for adjectives to describe just the levels of devastation and what people are in need of. Can you describe what is happening right now to meet those needs, but also looking forward to some semblance of a road to recovery?
Wow, it's really hard. It's really hard to look too far forward. We just from a Catholic point of view, you mentioned this one parish and one school, but there's many Catholics, for example, in this, impacted and uprooted by the fires, and so they have sent their children to schools outside the area. I think something like 30,000 public school students have been uprooted by the fires. So, I think many thousands of probably Catholic school students who their schools may be intact outside, the area, but they're going to be impacted. Their staff, their teachers, their students, are many of them are homeless. So there's some immediate needs for water and shelter and prayers. Of course.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been reading about how many schools that are not affected are basically grounds for donations, right? Water, food, all of that, and they are just packing it in and trying to distribute that. I know there was a nearby, I think it was St. Monica Parish near to the site of Corpus Christi that ended up having a mass for the people of Corpus Christi, and the tabernacle that you mentioned was there on the altar during that Mass. So there's just a lot of community right now as well. Shannon, can you tell us how we can help? Where do we go to help?
Yeah, in Matt's story that you mentioned about that family, there is a link to a GoFundMe page. Last I checked, it was north of $130,000. That's great. Also a drop in the bucket. I mean, these people have lost everything. And same thing with the parish. Corpus Christi Parish also has a GoFundMe site, and they're raising money, to rebuild and help their people. Catholic Charities and other agencies are very active right now, so that's another way to help.
Yes, and that is lacatholic.org. That's the Archdiocese site. So you've been listening to Register Radio on EWTN Radio. Thank you for listening. Next, we'll be talking about a farm boy turned exorcist who is now the Archbishop of Milwaukee. Jonathan Liedl shares the unique story of this Archbishop. Stay tuned to Register Radio here on EWTN Radio.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back. I'm Jeanette DeMello, host of Register Radio, together with Matthew Bunson, EWTN News' Vice President and Editorial Director. And we're joined right now by Jonathan Liedl, who is the Register's Senior Editor. Welcome, Jonathan.
Great to be with you guys.
So you recently covered the installation of the new Milwaukee Archbishop, Jeffrey Grob, and before that day, you had the opportunity to talk with him. He has quite a story, Jonathan. He grew up on a farm, but he also spent a long time in a big city, the Windy City of Chicago, as a priest of the Chicago Archdiocese. So two very different experiences, right? How did this influence the man?
Archbishop Grob grew up on a dairy farm outside of Madison, Wisconsin. So he talks about, on a farm where you deal with life and death, and you're really in a way dependent upon nature and God's providence. He really talked about learning to trust, right? Learning to trust that God was in charge, and that good things providence would kind of take care of him and his family. And he's kind of that experience, I think, has really kind of shaped his whole vocational journey. Like even when he was, called to become bishop and then archbishop, just accepting this as the next step in the Lord's plan. And then also, yeah, you're right. He was a priest and then auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of Chicago. Obviously, a humongous, archdiocese, and really there where he had roles like vicar general and was an expert in canon law. From the people I talked to, really kind of distinguished himself as just being a very good leader, a very competent, leader of the church in that way. So he has this kind of humility, but then also this kind of, very, very serious competency and leadership qualities, which I think will serve him and the people of Milwaukee well in the coming years.
Yeah, what typically stands out in an installation? I know that you've attended many, you've covered many others. What were some of the key liturgical aspects of an installation for a new archbishop? Yeah,
the installation mass is just so symbolic of really the whole theology of the episcopacy of bishops, right, and their leadership in the church. The liturgy began with the outgoing Archbishop Jerome Listecki sitting in the bishop's chair in the cathedral, and then the nuncio, right, the Pope's delegate to the U.S., Cardinal Christophe Pierre, reads from an apostolic mandate, Pope Francis kind of appointing Archbishop Grob to be the next leader of Milwaukee. And then the Archbishop takes that mandate. It's a scroll. It's like a big scroll written in Latin. And he walks around the whole church showing the people there, his new flock, that he's their archbishop, that the Pope has tasked him with this role of service. And then after that, he goes and sits in the chair. He puts on his crozier and his mitre, and then delegations from local parishes, from the local priests, and also civic leaders, including Cavalier Johnson, the mayor of Milwaukee, come and pay their respects to him. And then most importantly, he goes on to then celebrate the rest of the Mass, right? Preaching a homily and celebrating the Eucharist as the spiritual father of this new archdiocese. So for me, we talk about the liturgy as being a source of theology, the liturgy being a place where what the church really believes is represented. And I think an installation Mass for a new archbishop is really an incredible symbolic way to understand what the church teaches about bishops and the church. So it was a very powerful experience in that way.
Well, you mentioned Grob's now predecessor, now Archbishop Emeritus Jerome Listecki. Grob inherits Milwaukee from him. Listecki at one point was a professor of his at Mundelein. So what exactly is Grob walking into? What is he inheriting?
Well, I think he would be the first to say, and he has told me this, and he repeated it at the installation Mass, how grateful he is for what Archbishop Listecki has done over his 10-plus years as the Archbishop of Milwaukee. We think back to the beginning of Archbishop Listecki's tenure around 2011, 2012, and Milwaukee was facing bankruptcy because of the need to settle with victims of clergy sex abuse. So dark days for the Archdiocese of Milwaukee in those early times, but Archbishop Listecki really led the Archdiocese through that. People expressed their gratitude, standing ovations, thanking him for his leadership of the local church. And really, I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of growth and excitement in Milwaukee right now, a lot of energy around evangelization. The local seminary, St. Francis de Sales, has really strengthened itself and become an important place for the whole Catholic Church in the state of Wisconsin. So, Archbishop Grob really expressed his gratitude for his old teacher and said, really, the question is, how do I build upon what he's planted here? So that's what his task will be going forward.
You've written two great stories about this archbishop. One I mentioned was beforehand when you had the opportunity to talk to him, right? And that story is Farm Boy, Exorcist, Archbishop. Milwaukee's new shepherd aims to keep it real, and he really does sound like someone who's very down to earth. And then the second story that you wrote at ncregister.com is Milwaukee's new archbishop draws from rural roots at installation Mass. So both of those can be found online, and the profile one can be found in the print edition, January 26th. That story talks about him as an exorcist. That keeps it real, right? So how does one become an exorcist, and what does it entail?
Yeah, well, in Archbishop Grab's case, at least, he became an exorcist because he was asked to, and I think that's typically what happens if you're really like seeking to become an exorcist. I think, I think the local church leader might be a little wary of that, right? But in Archbishop Grab's case, he was sent to study and get a doctorate in canon law. He chose to study the revised rite of exorcism, which was new at the time, to just try to get a sense of it, get a sense of what the Universal Church was asking in this particular ministry. And when he came back to Chicago, Cardinal Francis George said, "Hey, you've got all this knowledge about the rite of exorcism. You seem like a spiritually inclined person and mature," and asked him to become an exorcist for the archdiocese. Archbishop Grab, when I brought it up during our interview, he didn't deny it or anything like that, but you could also tell that he treats this topic with a lot of humility. He said, "I don't put it on my business card. I don't like to draw attention to it because it's really not the sort of Hollywood spectacle that is often presented in so many ways." He said he was very real in, like, if we dilute the Catholic faith, he said, something fills that vacuum, and often it's not something very good. But he really emphasized to me that exorcism, first and foremost, is about the healing power and mercy of God. It's about taking someone who's been wounded, who obviously the demonic and the evil one have had some influence over, and grafting them back into the body of Christ. So that was his whole emphasis there. And I'm sure we've had other archbishops who've been exorcists, but I think it just is, very compelling for someone in that position to be aware of and have had that experience with darkness in this way, precisely so that he can emphasize the light and the goodness that Christ brings.
Let's shift gears a little bit. As a Green Bay Packer fan, you note that Archbishop Grab has proudly maintained his Packers allegiance despite being in the heart of the Chicago Bear territory, now for some decades. But there's another team I know that's pretty close to your heart, not too far from Chicago, and that's Notre Dame, that plays Ohio State on Monday for the national championship. You've highlighted the Catholic faith of Marcus Freeman, the head coach of Notre Dame. Tell us about him, because I know as a convert that he's got a really compelling story.
Yeah, absolutely. He's taken Notre Dame to the national championship in his third season, and so a lot of Irish fans are excited about that. But I think what really sets him apart is not just the wins on the field, but is kind of the way he's done it and the culture he's built at Notre Dame. He is someone who, as you mentioned, he's a convert to Catholicism himself. His wife is a cradle Catholic. Their 6 kids have all been baptized. So before his first season, August 2022, he entered the church. And Coach Freeman, he really views his job as not just winning, but really forming the student athletes under his charge to be good men. And he told me when I interviewed him a couple of years back, he said, "I want the men to think about what it means to embrace Jesus Christ." So part of that is restoring the practice of having Mass on game day, hours before kickoff. He said that's a really vulnerable period right before kickoff, and that's a really important time for a young man to open up to the gospel, to open up to the priest preaching, and if he's Catholic, and to receive the Eucharist as well. And really the team culture, right, is kind of permeated by this in so many ways. The quarterback, Riley Leonard, leads a Bible study. And I think it's very encouraging for a lot of Irish fans to see the success that the team is having under him, precisely because he seems like such a good leader, and really someone who is humble as well. He talks about how his Catholic faith has grown so much since he became Catholic in 2022, but also in kind of his trademark humility said, there's a lot of room for me to go and a lot of room for all of us to go. So, even if the Irish come up short on Monday, I think he's definitely won in so many other ways already.
We often hear about the concerns about Catholic universities, Catholic colleges of identity. Mm-hmm. Do you see this as part of sort of a recapturing of Catholic identity, and especially given the significance of sports, especially the football team, to Notre Dame?
I think it's important. I think it's definitely important for someone in that position to show really an integration. I think the previous coach, Brian Kelly, who was a baptized Catholic, who definitely has some views related to abortion and things like that were certainly not consistent with the Catholic faith. But I think he really tried to separate the the football side of it from the sort of integrated student side of it. And I think Coach Freeman is saying that really by his witness. I mean, he's really an educator, and he's showing that, that at a university, whatever excellence you're pursuing, whether it's academic and athletic, like the faith can be and should be a part of that. So, yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame is obviously a complicated and complex place. There's some fantastic Catholic things on campus. There are some concerning things as well. And, if you had to kind of put Coach Freeman in the witness that he's carrying forward on one side of that ledger or another, I think you'd definitely say that it's something encouraging for the university and its Catholic commitments.
One thing that we're seeing out there is, and we see it on the Ohio State side too, there just seems to be a lot more open discussion about the players' faith. We see that here in D.C. with Jaden Daniels openly, in his interviews and things like that. That's always happened. It just seems like it's happening more. It's kind of nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's data out there that shows young men right now are more religious than young women, which is very interesting. That's the first time I think, according to those surveys, that's ever happened. And I think, at least when it comes to people in college, I see this on campus at Notre Dame a lot. Like, young people who are religious they own it far more intentionally than I did when I was on campus 15 years ago. And that, I went to Mass and things like that, but there really seems to be like a leaning into that.
Thank you so much for reporting on this, because I think it is an important element of our coverage at the Register. And for more news, analysis, and commentary on this, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. Thanks for joining us here on Register Radio on EWTN. And until next week, on behalf of my producer, Michael McCall, my co-host, Matthew Bunson, and myself, Jeanette DeMello, I pray that God bless you.